What if the last normal moment of your life is so small you don't even notice it? The feel of familiar gravity under your feet, the weight of air in your lungs, the sound of your own heartbeat. Right before reality opens like a knife wound and something thin, fast, and cruel reaches through to take you. 1 second you are under your own sky, on your own world, living inside the boring safety you once hated. The next, the horizon bends at an angle that should not exist. The stars smear into razor lines, and a shadow falls that doesn't belong to your sun. No warning siren, no heroic last stand, no fleet in orbit. Just a flicker in the air as the Webway blooms open and sleek. Barbed silhouettes slide through like predators cutting through the skin of real space. The Drukhari don't arrive with spectacle. They arrive with precision, as if your world is just another mark on a long hunting ledger. In that split second before the screaming starts, you are still a person with memories, hopes, problems that felt huge to you. A heartbeat later, you are cargo. Hooks bite into flesh with engineered efficiency. Grav veins whine. Bodies are yanked upward like nothing more than weight. The worst part? The Drukhari don't even look angry. There is no fury, no rage, only a cold, clinical satisfaction, like hunters finally springing a trap they set a decade ago and already emotionally moved on from. To them, this is not war. This is harvest. And being harvested by the Drukhari is not about death. Death is what they avoid. Death is the waste they don't allow. The first shock is how fast your world disappears. One moment you are pressed into the deck of a raider or venom, air punched from your lungs, vision swimming. The next, the sky you knew is already far behind you, shrinking to nothing as the craft slashes back into the Webway. There is no time to process, no time to beg, no time for why. Real space peels away like paint, and you are dragged into a dimension that was never meant for human minds. The Webway is not the warp, not the calm of the void. It is something older, tighter, more deliberate. A lattice of tunnels carved by a species so advanced they used reality itself as a road network. The walls around you are not walls. They are horizons folded inward, gleaming with impossible angles and colors that make your eyes water just by existing. Gravity forgets what it's supposed to do. Your body thinks it's falling even when you're strapped down, your stomach lurching as the raider twists through paths only your captors can perceive. You hear the faintest sounds, whispers from somewhere behind the armor of your captors as they taste the fear in the air. Read the tiny tremors in your muscles, the tiny shifts in your scent. You aren't just seen, you're analyzed, appraised, evaluated like livestock. In the subtle tilt of a Drukhari's head, you feel it. They are already deciding where you belong in their city of knives. The quiet comes in waves, just long enough for your mind to try and fill the gaps with hope. Maybe the Imperium will trace the disturbance. Maybe an astropath saw something. Maybe your planet mattered to someone important enough to send a fleet. But those fragile thoughts are drowned by the way the Drukhari hold themselves. Relaxed, loose, utterly unhurried. Predators that have done this 1,000 times and expect to do it 1,000 more. You realize they are not afraid of pursuit. They are not afraid of punishment. They are not afraid of your species at all. One of them passes close, and in that brief proximity you feel something more horrifying than hatred. You feel boredom, contempt, mild amusement at your existence, the way a cat might be slightly interested in an insect that landed too close. You could scream threats, prayers, bargains. It would change nothing. To them, you are already processed. Your terror has been mentally filed under incoming resource. Behind the graceful movements and elegant armor, you catch hints of how they see you. A Drukhari warrior's gaze lingers on your trembling hands, not with pity, but with the tense focus of someone imagining where nerve clusters sit, how tendons pull under the skin, how easily they might be reattached, realigned, repurposed. Another's fingers flex unconsciously, as if feeling the ghost of a scalpel's handle. Even their stillness radiates intent. You are not a mystery to them. You are anatomy, potential, noise that will one day be turned into music. And while you are spiraling internally, trying desperately to make this moment mean something, your last fight, your last prayer, your last stand, your captors are already discussing distribution, quota, amusement, profit. When the raider bursts from the tunnel into the void surrounding Commorragh, your sense of scale dies. There is no city in human language that can describe what stretches before you. Commorragh is not built, it metastasized. Tower upon tower rises in defiance of geometry. Spires like talons curled inward, bridges like nerves stretched between impossible distances. Whole districts cling to the underside of others like tumors, lit by sickly hues of captured starlight and toxic neon that hurts to look at. In the sickly twilight of the stolen dimension, there is no natural sky, no true horizon, only layers of architecture crushing downward, as if the city itself is trying to swallow you. The air you will soon breathe, there is not truly air. It is a blend of recycled atmosphere, chemical residue, and something else, something psychic. Residual terror, concentrated over millennia. Commorragh is saturated with the echo of suffering. It clings to the metal, to the stone, to the people themselves. You realize this place is not just a city. It is a machine built to grind sentient experience into food. As your craft docks among a swarm of blades and hooks, you glimpse other raiders, other slave barges, other tortured silhouettes dragged in chains. Some scream, some stare ahead in shock. Some are already limp, fainted, or broken. You hear laughter, Drukhari voices sharp and melodious, trading jokes over how many slaves they took, which worlds yielded the best vintage, which captives cried the loudest. The way they speak about whole populations sounds like connoisseurs describing wines. This one has a sharp bouquet of panic. That one has a deep, slow burn of despair. They are not blinded by rage. They are sharpened by appetite. And somewhere in the back of your mind, something primal understands that this is worse than a rampaging foe. Rage burns fast. Hunger lingers. The first true horror arrives in the quiet moments between movement. Bound, shoved, herded through docking arteries and along hanging bridges that sway above bottomless pits. You occasionally find yourself with a second of stillness. In those tiny pauses, when the boots of your captors fade just a step away and the screams of other victims echo faintly instead of directly, your brain tries to rebuild a sense of self. You think about your name, your family, your home. You struggle to force those images into focus, to cling to something that proves you existed before this. But Commorragh is built to dissolve identity. Every hallway looks like a throat. Every balcony feels like a gallows. Every open chasm filled with distant arenas, shrines, markets, and torture chambers murmurs the same message. Nothing you were matters here. The city is loud when it wants to overwhelm you, but it's the little silences that break you. The moments when you realize no one is coming, nothing is stopping this, and you belong entirely to a place that shouldn't even exist. Here and there, you catch more subtle hints of Drukhari perspective. A Kabbalite pauses as your group is marched by and tilts her helm, considering you with a faint curiosity. Not what did you do, but what could you become? Her gaze travels over your build, the set of your jaw, the way you flinch at certain sounds. She isn't seeing you as a prisoner. She's mentally slotting you into a role: screamer, fighter, test subject, decorative piece. Somewhere deeper in the city, a Haemonculi might already be bidding on bodies like yours, interested in the tensile strength of your tendons or the reactions of your endocrine system to specific stims. In the arenas, Wych Cults measure your fear response as potential crowd flavor. Your terror is a commodity long before you understand why. The pacing of your experience becomes its own torture, short, sharp bursts of panic as you are shoved toward a new gate, a new portcullis, a new elevator that drops too quickly, followed by stretches of forced waiting in pens or cages where nothing happens except the slow collapse of hope. Each quiet interval is a trap. Your heartbeat calms slightly. Your mind begins to think of plans, escape routes, possibilities. Then a door opens and someone is dragged out, screaming, pleading, or already silent. They vanish into another corridor lined with flensing tools and restraint hooks, or down toward the roaring sound of a distant arena. The cage closes again. The silence returns, heavier than before. This rhythm continues until your nervous system itself starts to fray. Fear spikes, then dips, then spikes higher. You begin to understand that this is intentional. The Drukhari don't want constant terror, it dulls. They want a waveform. Hope, fear, numbness, panic, over and over. Each cycle harvesting a different flavor of agony. In the background of all this, you hear them talk about why. Not in the way a human would with guilt or justification, but with the icy honesty of creatures who have long since stopped lying to themselves. You pick up fragments. The name Slainish spoken like a curse and a threat. Mentions of souls thinning, of hunger in the dark, of the way abstaining from feeding causes their flesh to wither and their minds to fray. You realize something monstrous. They do this because they must, or at least that's what they tell themselves. The Drukhari are prey as well, prey to a god that feeds on their souls. Every act of cruelty, every scream ripped from a captive, every carefully sustained torment is, in their eyes, an act of self-preservation. Your suffering buys them another day of youth, Another century of stolen vitality. Their elegance, their beauty, their sharp, cold eyes are all paid for with lives like yours. Suddenly their boredom makes sense. This is not a hobby. It is maintenance. And so, as you are finally filed into some holding space, whether a cell, a cage, a suspended platform, you feel the full weight of the truth settle on you. Being taken by the Drukhari is not a discrete event, not a single nightmare that you wake from with a scar and a story. It is entry into a system designed to stretch your fear across as much time as possible, to pull every scream from your lungs, every desperate thought from your mind, every last spark of identity from your soul, and turn it into fuel for a civilization that refuses to die. Death, you realize, is not the worst thing that can happen to you in the 41st millennium. Death is mercy because death means the story ends. Here in Commorragh, the story keeps going long after you want it to stop. And somewhere high above, on a balcony carved from bone and black glass, a Drukhari lord watches new slaves arrive and feels a faint, pleasant tingle as fresh terror enters the city's psychic air. Barely more to him than the scent of a new spice, and you understand, at last, why the galaxy whispers. It is better to die on your feet than to vanish into the Webway and live as one more note in the Drukhari's endless symphony of pain. Chapter 2: Commorragh, the infinite city of suffering. What if the place you arrive after being taken by the Drukhari isn't just a city, but the physical form of a nightmare that never ends? A place so old, so warped, and so saturated with agony that it has become its own ecosystem of suffering. Commorragh is often called the Dark City, but even that title is too small for what it truly is. It is not a single metropolis hanging in the void. It is a cancer grown fat in the hollowed veins of the Webway, a sprawl of impossible architecture stitched together from the ruins of 1,000 fallen wonders. It is the grand trophy of a species that refused to die when their own excess birthed a god, and chose instead to build a shrine of cruelty to keep that god at bay. From the moment your raider glides into its gravitational embrace, you feel something wrong in your bones. A pressure that doesn't come from gravity or atmosphere, but from the accumulated terror of uncounted souls. The Dark City is not dead. It is overfull. Every stone, every spire, every bridge carries the psychic residue of 1 billion screams, layered over so many times that your nervous system recognizes the place is hostile before your conscious mind understands why. Commorragh doesn't have a center so much as it has layers. At its visible core are the vast, knife-edged superstructures, the primary districts of cabals, Wych Cults, Haemonculi covens, and 1,000 lesser factions. These towers pierce upward and downward at insane angles, hanging over chasms lit by artificial suns. Tiny stolen stars suspended in cages of dark metal, their light filtered into sickly shades that never quite feel warm. The sky, if you can call it that, is a collage of floating platforms, shattered void, vaporous nothing, and overlapping levels of city that block one another from sight. You can look up and see a palace hanging upside down over an arena. Look down and see a market suspended by chains above a writhing pit of biological waste. Look sideways and see entire districts drifting slowly through the air, tethered to the main mass by long, flexible bridges that look disturbingly like veins. This is Commorragh as the Drukhari want you to see it. A cruel, glittering maze, beautiful from a distance, lethal from every angle. But even this is only the skin. Behind the primary layers lie the satellite realms. Strips of stolen real space and warped Webway chunks welded onto the dark city over countless millennia. Here, pirate lords carve their private empires. Lesser cabals squat in decaying husks of older districts. Renegade Haemonculi build private hells in forgotten corridors. These annexes, called sub-districts or shadow realms, constantly shift position and allegiance. Sometimes they drift close to the main body of Commorragh. Sometimes they spiral out into the void, still physically linked but practically unreachable by all but the most daring or insane. The Drukhari know every twist, every hidden gate, every short path that cuts through a region where you age 10 days in 10 steps. You, as a captive, know none of it. Commorragh is designed so that even if you somehow broke free from your chains, every direction you could run would lead deeper into someone else's ownership. The city isn't just a space, it's a net. The strangest thing is how alive it all feels without being organic. The buildings seem to lean in when you pass, balconies bristle with watching figures, masked eyes glint from slits in walls that look solid until you get close. You notice how few true flat surfaces exist. Everything is edged, angled, sloped, as if the very concept of safety offends the city. There are no open plazas, no parks, no neutral spaces. Every step forward requires you to pass under something sharp, past someone watching, near some drop that goes down so far your mind refuses to imagine hitting bottom. That is not an accident. Commorragh was built to deny comfort, to weaponize space itself as a constant low-level threat. The Drukhari don't simply torture captives in chambers. They torture them with the knowledge that the entire environment is hostile. An escape requires passing through a world designed by predators who never want their prey to even imagine freedom. You feel the Drukhari perspective in the smallest architectural details. Ramps are designed to let them move swiftly in grav boots while forcing clumsy, stumbling progress from anything on foot. Railings are rare. When they exist, they're often barbed, coated with toxins, or electrified at random intervals. Doorways are low and narrow for humans, but just high enough that Drukhari can glide through gracefully, teaching you physically that this world belongs to them. Transparent floors in some areas let you see miles of city beneath you. Shimmering spires, open torture balconies, arena pits, gardens of glass and bone. But the height is so extreme it makes your stomach lurch. You catch glimpses of slave caravans, living chains of bodies led through distant arteries. The tiny flash of a whip, the sudden collapse of a figure too exhausted to move. To the Drukhari walking alongside you, these sights are background noise, like distant traffic. Their eyes slide over such scenes not because they don't notice, but because they have already categorized every visible suffering into processed. In quieter moments, those brief pauses in transit where your captors wait for clearance to move through a particular gate, or hold position on a suspended platform while a higher-ranking Cabalite convoy passes. You overhear snatches of conversation between them. They talk about Commorragh like a connoisseur talks about a favorite city. Which districts have the best view of incoming raids? Which realms have the most interesting screams at dawn cycle? Which Haemonculi has opened a new gallery of sculptures? They compare how the city has changed over centuries. This tower used to belong to a rival cable before Vect restructured the power web. That canyon was once open void until it was filled with arenas when new Wych Cults needed more space to expand their shows. To them, Commorragh is a living chronicle of ambition and cruelty. A city whose skyline is carved by betrayal and cemented with fear. Then the wave of horror hits again. Your group is marched past a series of open balconies overlooking lower tiers. In that moment, the noise of the city shifts. Cheers roar up from below, followed by the wet thunder of something massive smashing into flesh. The air changes, it tastes like copper and chemicals. You catch a glimpse of an arena carved into the side of a tower complex. It stands packed with Drukhari pressed close together, their eyes bright with unnatural light. On the blood-slick floor below, shapes move too fast and violently for your eyes to track. Beasts, gladiators, slaves, who knows? You hear the sound of something laughing, not a single voice but a chorus, and feel the way the crowd trembles with shared arousal as some new atrocity unfolds. Your captors pause for a fraction too long, some of them turning to watch. You notice their posture subtly shift, their pupils dilate behind helm lenses, their fingers twitch as if feeling phantom weapon grips. For that instant, you are briefly forgotten, overshadowed by the spectacle. And in that forgetting, you glimpse the hierarchy of priorities here. You are not special. You are raw material in a city where there is always more agony available than anyone can savor at once. Commorragh's position inside the Webway means no signal escapes easily. Astropathic screams bleed into labyrinthine channels and never reach real space intact. There is no stable route back, no fixed corridor you could memorize. The Drukhari don't just use the Webway, they've burrowed into it, sank hooks into its structure, turned collapses and anomalies into private shortcuts. To the Imperium, this makes Commorragh nearly impossible to attack. To you, it means something simpler and more devastating. Nobody knows where you are, and even if they did, they couldn't get here in time. The city is protected by distance measured not in light years, but in metaphysical steps. Every pathway to Commorragh is owned, claimed by cabals as toll routes, guarded by warriors who slaughter on sight, warped by Haemonculi experiments or Wych arenas extending their influence into the very arteries of travel. Escape doesn't just require courage, it requires knowledge only predators possess. Outside the obvious brutality, there's a subtler horror to Commorragh. Its elegance. The Drukhari have a cruel aesthetic sense that permeates everything. Torture racks are graceful, made from polished alloys. Restraint harnesses are designed as art pieces when viewed from above. Even the cages have lines, silhouettes, shadows arranged to look pleasing from certain balconies. From a Drukhari vantage point, the city is beautiful. The way light reflects off stained glass windows set into execution towers. The way arenas form geometric patterns when seen from high observation decks. The way slave pens, Haemonculi laboratories, and cable palaces form a sprawling sigil when viewed from the correct angle. A sigil whose meaning you will never understand, but whose outline suggests that even the suffering has been laid out according to some obscene design. The Dark City is a gallery, and you are one more installation waiting to be curated. And threaded through it all, the structure, the aesthetics, the cruelty, is the curse of Slaanesh. You hear it when Drukhari falls silent for a heartbeat, when their eyes harden and their attention turns inward for the briefest moment. You catch fragments of conversations about thinning, about feeling something gnawing at the edges of their souls, about needing a good raid to feel whole again. Commorragh exists because its population is haunted by a hunger not entirely their own. Their souls are leaking, slowly devoured by the god their ancestors birthed. Every district, every cell, every arena is a defense mechanism, a way to stave off that consumption by displacing it onto others. They don't just enjoy your pain, they divert a cosmic predator's gaze with it. In their minds, they are not simply cruel, they are clever, surviving the doom their species earned by weaponizing everyone else's suffering. From their perspective, Commorragh is not a prison. It is a bunker, a fortress built against a god's appetite, with your agony stacked like sandbags along the walls. So when you stand chained on some overlook and take in the impossible scope of the Dark City, its tangled architecture, its infinite tears of agony, its predatory elegance, you finally understand what it truly means to be taken here. You are not a person stolen from your world for some singular purpose. You are a minor input into a system designed to run forever. Commorragh doesn't need you specifically. It needs what you will produce. Fear, pain, despair, the psychic discharge of a conscious mind being broken piece by piece. In this infinite city of suffering, you are not even a drop in the ocean. You are a molecule in a tide that has already drowned uncounted billions. And as a distant scream rises from somewhere beneath your feet and your captors pause to savor its tone, the sickest realization hits you. In Commorragh, the city itself feels immortal, and you are here to help it stay that way. Chapter 3: The Cabals, Pirate Empires Built on Human Misery. What if every raid, every scream, every missing world wasn't random brutality, but the calculated business model of a civilization that turned torture into politics and slavery into currency? To understand why being taken by the Drukhari is worse than death, you have to understand the Cabals, because they are the engine that keeps Commorragh fed. Cabals are not clans the way humans think of them, not families or nations or standard military units. They are weaponized aristocracies, predatory corporations of cruelty masquerading as noble houses. Each cable is an empire of blades, operating on a simple principle. The more suffering they harvest, the longer they live. When a raid hits your world, it's not just because you were unlucky. It's because somewhere in the Dark City, a cable needed stock. Maybe their soul vaults were running low. Maybe a rival cable scored an enormous haul and they need to prove they can match it. Maybe a witch cult they sponsored demanded fresher stock for an upcoming spectacle. Or maybe a single archon decided your sector was a convenient example in a political grudge. The reasons vary. The outcome doesn't. Once a cable has picked you, Your fate is tied to their hunger. Cabals are led by archons, cold, impossibly old Drukhari who have survived so many assassination attempts that paranoia isn't a flaw, it's survival instinct. They sit on thrones high above Commorragh's streets, but their power isn't measured in land. It's measured in routes, fleets, and flows of live bodies. An Archon's real wealth is his control over Webway paths, raiding patterns, slave markets, Haemonculi contracts, and Wych Cult partnerships. Beneath them, an intricate hierarchy branches downward. Sybarites, fleet masters, lieutenants, arena patrons, torture overseers, all of them competing and cooperating in a dance where one misstep means eternal punishment. Each rank survives by pleasing the Archon above them with results, new slaves, new products, new sources of terror, and by feeding off those below them with taxes of blood and pain. A cabal is essentially a vertical food chain where everyone is predator to someone and prey to someone else, and humans sit at the very bottom. From your perspective as a captive, the cabal that owns you is invisible at first. You just feel the consequences of its culture. You notice how organized everything is, how there are no wasted movements, how quickly you are cataloged, sorted, cuffed, redirected. You assume it's just the Drukhari way. But this cold efficiency is a cabal's signature. Some cabals favor bulk harvests, filling entire vaults with terrified civilians to feed thousands of their own. Others are boutique operations, targeting specific gene types, psychers, warriors, or rare xenos, each slave plucked with collector's precision. To them, the idea of individuality only matters insofar as it affects market value. A strong, defiant prisoner with combat scars might be earmarked for the arenas. A psyker might be tagged for experimental torment. A child might be sold as a pet, a living decor piece, or a mindbreak project for a bored noble. The cabal doesn't see this as cruel. It sees it as diversification. In quieter corners of Commorragh, away from the overt spectacle of arenas and execution balconies, you can sense the cabal logic at work. Slave pens are arranged according to expected yield. Those who still panic easily place closer to traffic routes, so their constant fear perfumes the air for passing Drukhari. Those who are broken and unresponsive are kept deeper, closer to Haemonculi labs where their value can be extracted surgically rather than emotionally. You overhear arguments between lower-ranking cabalites over who gets credit for particularly flavorful captives. One complains that another always steals the best vintages from fresh raids. Another insists that a particular world's population screams with a richer resonance. Their words are hollow to you, but to them, this is resource management. The cabal doesn't view itself as a gang of raiders. It views itself as the refined top of a supply chain. The hierarchy extends beyond bodies to territory. Cabals control districts the way crime syndicates control neighborhoods, but with far more violence and far less stability. Territory in Commorragh isn't static. Whole sections are seized, razed, rebuilt, launched into the void, or welded onto other realms depending on who wins which feud. From the vantage point of a cabal, every building, bridge, and balcony has a ledger attached. How many slaves can be run through this route per raid cycle? How many Haemonculi contracts can be serviced from these holding pens? How many witch events can be staged using this arena? When cabals war with each other, they don't just want to kill rivals. They want to absorb their infrastructure. A defeated cable's stockpiles of captives are seized, their Webway routes stolen, their pending slave deliveries intercepted. To the Drukhari, this is not chaos. It is evolution. The weak cable dies. The stronger one inherits its suffering. From the Drukhari perspective, their cabals are proof of superiority. They look at human empires and see waste, hesitation, sentiment. Humans wage wars to control land, ideology, or resources that don't scream when they're cut. Drukhari cabals wage war for the only resource they believe matters: sentient agony. When they speak of successful campaigns, they don't count territory taken or ships destroyed. They count bodies, quality of fear, how long the captives lasted under questioning or entertainment. They have terms for different types of terror, like vintners do for different notes in wine. The high, sharp panic of a newly captured civilian. The low, constant dread of someone who understands there's no escape. The broken, choking sobs of a warrior tortured into betraying comrades. In their minds, they are artists and entrepreneurs in a market fueled by every emotion your species has ever feared feeling. The raids that drag you here are not random outbreaks of violence. They are planned operations signed off by archons at councils where variables are calculated with cold attention. Risk of imperial response, potential yield, likely presence of psychers, geographical layout of population centers, quality of local defenses, and how much personal amusement can be extracted from the process. Sometimes a cable hits a world simply because it's too close to a rival's usual hunting grounds. Provoking a reaction might destabilize that rival's contracts with a witch cult or expose them to an angry homunculus. Sometimes a planet is deliberately allowed to grow rich and prosperous for centuries just so its eventual fall will generate maximum despair. Imagine living in a system that has mysteriously avoided major conflict for generations, only to learn that your stability was not protection, it was fattening. Every cable also maintains relationships with the other power pillars of Commorragh. They sponsor witch cults, paying in captives, weapons, and arenas in exchange for prestige and favors. They lobby Haemonculi for custom work. Assassins made from reassembled bodies, torture engine enhancements, resurrection contracts for important lieutenants. They cultivate informants in lesser cabals, sub-factions, and even in slave pens. Information is traded like poison, dripped into rival structures at key moments to trigger purges and coups. This means that as a captive, you are never simply shunted into a single fate. You are part of shifting plans. An archon might decide you make a better gift than a commodity, a better bargaining chip than a spectacle. The worst part is that you don't know what you are to them. To you, every second is terror. To them, you are line item number 7321 from Raid 40K. Sometimes, if you look at their faces long enough, you catch a glimpse of how cabals justify themselves. Beneath the cruelty is a cold conviction. This is what survival looks like. They know what happened when their species lost control once, the birth of Slaanesh, the fall of their empire, the near extinction of their kind. They watched their gods die and their souls become interest payments on a cosmic debt they can never fully pay. In that context, their cabals are not just power structures. They are survival strategies. Every raid on your world, every torment chamber, every terrified breath you take in their custody is, to them, a small victory against being dragged screaming into the abyss by a god of excess they did not ask for but now cannot escape. In their eyes, your species is soft, naive, ignorant of the real rules of the universe. They see your shock, your outrage, your horror at what they do, and they interpret it as proof of your inferiority. You still believe in mercy. They believe in margins. That is the difference. The wave-like rhythm of dread continues even here. There are moments when cable activity seems far away, the screams distant, the blades quiet, the sky a little less choked with incoming raiders. In those fleeting lulls, your mind claws for comfort. Maybe they've forgotten you. Maybe they've moved on to someone else. Then a new raid fleet returns, and everything surges again. Engines roaring, chains rattling, announcements echoing through the district as fresh stock floods in. Promotions are given, feasts are held, punishments are meted out to any Cabalite who underperformed. You realize with a sinking feeling that even your continued survival depends on their metrics. If your terror no longer meets expectations, you might be passed down the food chain to someone who values you only as raw parts. In the end, the Cabals are the answer to a question you didn't know you needed to ask. How can a city like Commorragh function without collapsing into random chaos? It functions because every scream is accounted for, every raid is budgeted, every slave pen is part of a vast, invisible ledger. The Cabals are the accountants of horror, the logisticians of torment, the sovereign powers that ensure the dark city never runs out of the one thing it cannot afford to lose: stolen life. And as you sit in the dark, chains digging into your skin, listening to distant engines and closer footsteps, you understand the final, crushing truth. You are not here by accident. You are here because a cable needed you. And as long as they need what you can suffer, they will make sure you live long enough to deliver it. Chapter 4: The Flesh Sculptors. Haemonculi and the Art of Endless Pain. What if the worst thing about Commorragh isn't the raids, the cabals, or the arenas, but the realization that the Drukhari do not merely torture the body? They rebuild it, repurpose it, resurrect it, and reshape it into something that can suffer more than nature ever intended. Now you enter the domain of the Haemonculi, the ancient flesh sorcerers, the surgeons of damnation, the artisans who have turned pain itself into a science. If the Cabals feed on your terror, the Haemonculi farm it. Their covens are the deepest roots of the dark city, older than most Cabals, older than many districts themselves. And the darkest truth is this: the Drukhari fear them as much as you do. Even archons bow their heads. Even witch cults tread lightly around their laboratories. Because Haemonculi do not merely hurt people. They own the secrets of suffering, the keys to immortality, and the power to stitch souls as easily as they stitch flesh. If Cabals treat you as a product, Haemonculi see you as material, raw clay for their craft, a blank page for their art. The first thing you sense when you're dragged toward a homunculus domain is the shift in atmosphere, not physical but psychic. The air feels older, heavier, thick with secrets and rotting memories. You don't smell decay, you smell experiments. Strange chemicals sting your sinuses. Faint whispers curl in the edges of your hearing. The corridors slope downward, but not in any way consistent with gravity. You walk down, then sideways, then down again until your sense of direction collapses. Haemonculi build their lairs like mazes, but not to confuse intruders. They build them to break hope. Even the walls seem alive, pulsing faintly with embedded nerve lines. Flesh grown into architecture, architecture grown into flesh. A rail may twitch, a floor panel may shiver under your feet. You realize, slowly and with horror, that this entire place is not a building. It is a body. Haemonculi themselves defy understanding. They are old, older than you can imagine, yet they do not wither naturally. They rebuild themselves constantly, replacing organs, limbs, faces, even entire skeletons, each alteration a step further from what they were. Their movements are too smooth, their limbs too many or too few depending on their craft. Their eyes glitter like surgical tools dipped in malice. Their voices, when they speak, carry the calm, soft tones of a teacher explaining something interesting. Not a threat, not a boast, but pure fascination. To a homunculus, you are not a victim. You are an opportunity, and that is so much worse. The way they look at you is unlike any other Drukhari gaze. Cabals see value, Wyches see entertainment, but Haemonculi see potential configurations. In their minds, your body is a blueprint with thousands of possible revisions. They imagine how your muscles will behave when stretched to new lengths, how your vocal cords will sound after modification, how your pain receptors might react if duplicated, amplified, or rearranged. They consider whether your spine should remain intact or whether it would be more useful distributed across multiple creations. They debate whether your consciousness should stay in your body or be transferred into something with more limbs, more eyes, more nerves. You are not a person. They stripped that away the moment they dragged you in. You are a puzzle they cannot wait to take apart. The laboratories of the Haemonculi are not places of chaos. They are disturbingly organized. Operating slabs arranged with precision. Tools polished to a shine that reflects your terror with cruel clarity. Containers filled with fluids that pulse as though alive. Restraint rigs designed for specific species, specific body structures, specific torments. Every instrument has a purpose. Every mechanism has a meaning. Every scream has a slot in the soundscape. This is not butchery. This is craftsmanship. Haemonculi do not rush, do not lash out, do not lose control. They savor, they measure, they study, they refine. They keep victims alive not because death is unwelcome, but because death would end the experiment too early. And then there are their creations. Grotesques, racks, and abominations that shuffle or glide through the labs, their bodies twisted into impossible forms. Some still resemble humanoids, though stretched or widened or dislocated beyond recognition. Others have extra limbs grafted crudely or elegantly, depending on the Haemonculi style. Some have no faces, some have too many, some carry their own organs in glass sacks that pulse rhythmically. They move without complaint because their pain has been rewired. Some feel nothing at all. Some feel everything but cannot die. Some feel only what their masters permit. These constructs serve as assistants, guards, and canvases for further improvements. Many of them were once like you, and many remember, if not who they were, then that they once screamed. The horror deepens when you learn that Haemonculi can revive the dead. They cannot resurrect in the holy, miraculous sense. They simply refuse to let a soul rest. A Haemonculus with the right tools, the right corpse, and enough accumulated agony harvested from captives can stitch a soul back into a body, whether that soul wants to return or not. Death does not release you. In Commorragh, death is an inconvenience for your captors, an interruption in the experiment. Haemonculi pride themselves on maintenance, repairing torn limbs, reattaching removed faces, regenerating organs, reanimating failed subjects. You begin to understand that there is a level of suffering beyond death. The suffering of dying again and again and again because someone else wants to see how many times a mind can break before it becomes something new. In the pauses between torment, small, precious lulls that feel like breaths at the bottom of an ocean, you hear them speak to each other. Their conversations are gentle, academic, the tone of professors discussing theories over tea. They talk about musculature elasticity, about soul thread integrity, about the flavor of different sufferings, about how long a human consciousness can be stretched before it stops producing usable fear. They critique each other's creations with the calm precision of art critics. One Haemonculus praises another's symmetrical graftwork, but claims the vocal modifications are uninspired. Another laments that a subject expired too quickly, ruining a study. You realize with sinking dread that your pain is not personal. It is professional. Worse still are the Drukhari who visit Haemonculi labs. Archons come for enhancements, regeneration implants, nerve-deadening grafts, backup organs grown in fluid tanks. Wyches come for combat modifications, adrenal boosters, toxin filters, sensory increments. Lesser Drukhari come for body ornamentation, living tattoos, embedded creatures, nerve song chambers. Every enhancement is paid for not with currency but with suffering, yours or someone else's. To afford a new spine cloak, a Drukhari might need 10 humans tortured to death across a week. To purchase a resurrection contract, they might need a month's worth of harvested agony from an entire captured settlement. You are part of an economy where pain is gold, where dread is silver, where deaths are receipts. You, as a prisoner, exist in a rhythm of terror designed by these creatures. The wave-like pacing becomes more precise. Sudden procedures, long silent treatments, brief recoveries, unexpected revivals, then new experiments. The unpredictability is engineered. They do not want constant agony that dulls the mind. They want peaks and valleys, pain and relief, dread and confusion. They want to see what breaks first. Your body, your sanity, or your soul. And when one breaks, they fix it so it can break differently next time. The worst truth comes quietly. Haemonculi do not see themselves as monsters. They see themselves as protectors of their species. They believe their art is what keeps the Drukhari alive, what holds Slaanesh at bay. They believe that torment is a resource, that suffering is a shield. Their cruelty is not chaos. It is infrastructure. And as you lie there, strapped to a slab of living metal, listening to the soft, thoughtful murmurs of ancient artisans preparing their next masterpiece, you finally understand the deepest horror of the Dark City. The Drukhari do not simply inflict pain. They demand that pain become useful. Your agony is not waste. It is fuel. It is currency. It is art. And in the hands of a homunculus, it is endless. Chapter 5. The Arenas of Carnage. Wishes, drugs, and bloodsport entertainment. What if the only mercy the Dark City ever offers you is the illusion that dying quickly in the arenas might be better than being taken to a homunculus laboratory? Only for you to realize that Commorragh's arenas are designed specifically to make sure death is neither quick nor merciful. The Wych Cults are the heartbeat of Drukhari entertainment, the gladiatorial aristocracy whose existence proves that the Drukhari don't just enjoy suffering, they worship it. And for a captive dragged into their world, the nightmare shifts from surgical cruelty to theatrical savagery, where every scream becomes applause and every drop of blood is part of the show. If the Haemonculi are surgeons, then the Wishes are dancers, lethal, graceful, and utterly addicted to agony. Their arenas fill the Dark City like fiery ulcers, carved into towers, suspended over voids, stacked in tiers that overlook killing fields where thousands of lives have been ended, each more spectacularly than the last. The cults do not seek to kill efficiently. They seek to perform. From the moment you're dragged toward an arena district, the atmosphere changes. The air is charged with narcotic fumes that buzz in your skull. Distant shrieks echo like distorted music. Crowds swarm balconies and bridges in tides of glittering blades and jeweled masks. The Drukhari who fill these stands are not bored spectators. They are predators eager for a feast of emotion. You can feel it in the pulsing psychic pressure emanating from them. A collective hunger for violence so intense it feels like a physical weight. As you march deeper toward your fate, you see the cult symbols carved into the walls. Stylized fangs, winged silhouettes, elegant curves that resemble dancing forms but drip with razor-edged malice. Each Wych cult has its own aesthetic. Some prefer high-speed dueling, others monstrous beasts, others elaborate team performances. But all of them share one truth. They exist to take the suffering that Cabal's harvest and turn it into spectacle. You might imagine that the Wishes are wild, chaotic killers driven by bloodlust. The reality is worse. They are disciplined. They are artists of the body. Their movements are choreographed, their strikes precise, their cruelty calibrated. A witch doesn't just kill, they study. Each fight is an experiment in maximizing spectacle, testing new combinations of combat drugs, evaluating how different species react to terror under pressure. They monitor your breathing, your flinches, the way your pupils dilate, all while performing flips, spins, leaps, and acrobatic maneuvers that defy physics. Their armor is minimal not because they want to challenge themselves, but because they want to feel your panic radiating off you, the sound of your heart hammering in their ears. To them, combat is dance, death is art, and fear is the music that guides their every motion. The witch arenas themselves are engineered ecosystems of horror. Some are pits filled with shifting terrain, razor wire ridges, collapsing platforms, spiked wheels controlled by witch technicians above. Others are enormous coliseums with rotating walls, hydraulic lifts, and sudden drops that force captives into traps. Some are flooded chambers where water levels rise and fall unpredictably, filled with venomous aquatic creatures bred purely for entertainment. Others are arenas lit by ultraviolet lamps that distort depth perception, lined with mirrors that disorient captives and amplify the spectacle. The variation is deliberate. Spectators crave novelty, and wishes crave applause. Every arena is a theater where suffering is amplified, manipulated, magnified until it becomes something unforgettable. The combat drugs are another layer of torment entirely. Before being thrown into an arena, captives are injected with a cocktail designed to push their bodies into states they were never meant to endure. Some drugs force hyper-awareness, making every sound and movement overwhelmingly vivid. Others overstimulate muscles, causing uncontrollable spasms. Some numb pain not to help you, but to make sure you don't pass out too soon. Others heighten pain sensitivity to unbearable extremes. Some induce panic. Others induce euphoric confusion. The Weishes choose these mixtures depending on the performance they want to create. A terrified captive running blindly across shifting platforms brings a different reaction from the crowd than a drugged, over-energized captive who believes they have a chance. Your emotional state is part of the choreography. As you are dragged to the staging cells, you see the fate of those who came before you. Bodies carved with precision, survivors trembling in corners, injected with stabilizers so they can fight again. Corpses being carried out to make room for the next wave. Witch attendants, pale, beautiful, bored. Adjust your restraints, apply injectors, and whisper mock praise about how interesting your reactions might be. They do not see you as a fighter. You are the instrument on which the Weishes will play. Some captives beg. Some pray. Some try to attack the guards and are beaten instantly, dragged off for special treatment. None of it matters. The doors will open and you will run, because running is the last instinct left to creatures who know they're already dead. And then the arena swallows you. The roar of the crowd hits like a physical force, thousands of eyes focusing on your trembling form. Weishes emerge from shadowed gates, their bodies painted in shimmering colors, their blades humming with energy. Their expressions, whether hidden behind masks or displayed openly, carry the same electric thrill, anticipation. They leap onto platforms, flip across beams, land with feline grace on narrowing spires. Every movement is a declaration of dominance. They do not approach you immediately. They want to savor your panic, watch you choose a direction, watch you make the first mistake. And when they strike, it is always sudden. A flash of movement, a blade crossing your vision, a sting of blood, a burst of laughter from the crowd. They wound, retreat, leap, dance. They toy with you the way dancers improvise with music, letting your terror guide their style. The beasts of the arena add another layer. The Drukhari breed creatures from real space, the warp, and their own twisted laboratories. Some have too many limbs, others have none. Some flicker between forms. Some can smell fear chemicals from across the field. They are released at calculated moments to heighten performance. A witch might intentionally lure you toward a beast's pit, then flip away at the last moment so the creature focuses on you. Or she might use the beast as a prop, stabbing it just enough to enrage it before driving it toward you, creating a chaotic, deadly dance that thrills the audience. Others bring enslaved warriors, orcs, ogrins, humans, drugged or controlled with neural lash implants, to serve as obstacles or as living shields. These warriors fight not for survival, but because their minds have been carved into aggression. They are victims just like you, but you will likely never see them as such. Some Wyches specialize in psychological torment. They study patterns, how long it takes for a human to break, how the presence of allies changes fear responses, how sound frequencies can trigger panic or despair. They use pheromone projectors, sonic blades, flicker fields that create phantom images. They manipulate the lighting, the terrain, the soundscape. A witch may appear behind you without making a sound, whisper a single word that triggers the last memory of your home, then disappear again. Another may scratch something into your arm. Not a wound, not a mark, but a message to the crowd, encouraging them to vote on your fate through psychic resonance fields. But the cruelest truth is that Wyches do not kill you early. They kill you only when the performance peaks. Their sense of timing is exquisite, intuitive, honed by centuries of practice. They wait for your last reserves of hope to crumble. They wait for your body to shake from exhaustion. They wait for your emotions to crest into the perfect flavor. And in that final moment, they deliver death not as mercy, but as climax, an artistic flourish at the end of a well-executed performance. Yet even death isn't guaranteed. Sometimes they spare captives who fought well, not out of kindness, but because the audience wants to see them suffer again. Surviving one match is the worst possible outcome. You are marked as promising stock. You are healed, drugged, patched, and thrown back again and again until your body cannot take it. And then the Haemonculi claim you to repurpose whatever remains. Wyches see this not as cruelty but as celebration. Captives who last multiple fights are favorites, their suffering a recurring delight to the crowd. From the Drukhari perspective, the arenas serve a vital purpose. Wyches burn emotions into the psychic air, releasing shockwaves of fear and pain that ripple through Commorragh, feeding the masses. The arenas keep the city young. They keep Slaanesh at bay. They make existence feel sharp, vivid, electric. Wyches view themselves as cultural icons, artists who transform death into meaning, suffering into beauty, captivity into spectacle. They believe that without them, the dark city would decay faster, fall apart, rot into irrelevance. And from your perspective, trapped in the belly of this nightmare, there is only one truth. The arenas are where hope dies flamboyantly. In the Haemonculi labs, your suffering is quiet, technical, methodical. Here it is loud. It is public. It is shared. It is celebrated. Every second you survive is agony extended, and every second you die is agony amplified. Because in Commorragh, nothing is ever wasted, especially fear. Chapter 6. The Fate of Captives. What actually happens to you? What if the true nightmare of being taken by the Drukhari isn't the raid, the cabals, the Haemonculi, or the arenas, but the horrifying realization that there is a system, a process, a methodical machine behind your suffering, and that every step of your fate has already been planned long before you ever screamed. In Commorragh, nothing is random. You are not lost. You are not forgotten. You are not overlooked. You are processed. From the instant a Drukhari raider drags you screaming into the Webway, your destiny is already decided by an invisible calculus of value, demand, cruelty, and politics. You are not a prisoner, you are inventory. Your fear levels, your body type, your age, your genetic quirks, your emotional reactions, even the way you begged when they took you, these variables determine where you go, what you endure, and how long you survive. The Drukhari don't waste anything. Even your panic is recycled into energy. Even your tears are useful. Your entire being becomes part of a cycle built to stretch suffering across as much time as possible. The very first stage of your fate is assignment, and it happens before you even understand where you are. When raider crews deliver captives into holding galleries, Drukhari overseers evaluate each one with a mixture of apathy and cold expertise. They don't need scanners. They read terror like a language. They can tell how quickly a human will break simply by how their pupils contract in the dark city's unnatural light. They can sense whether your fear is hot and frantic, which the Wyches prefer, or slow and deep, the kind that makes Haemonculi salivate. They examine your posture, your breathing, your microflinches. A trembling lip might save you from a Haemonculus and send you to the arenas instead. Though save is not the correct word. A defiant stare might condemn you to a Haemonculus table, because your psychological resistance promises fascinating results. A strong body might make you a labor thrall in the subrealms, while a weaker frame might be tagged for sampling, which is exactly what it sounds like. Every part of you becomes data, and the Drukhari are expert readers of the language of pain. Once assigned, you are herded into the preparation pens, where your real suffering begins. These pens are quiet, not silent, but the kind of quiet that makes you feel like noise itself is forbidden. Drukhari attendants move among the captives with bored efficiency, injecting chemicals, attaching restraints, marking foreheads with glowing sigils that correspond to destination routes. Some pens are cold and sterile, meant to numb the mind before the torment ahead. Others are hot and claustrophobic, designed to induce panic that heightens your value. Some captives are placed in sensory deprivation chambers, seasoned before sale. Others are left in cages suspended over voids so deep they seem bottomless, the fear of falling amplifying the terror of being chosen next. In these holding zones, the wave pattern of fear begins. Long stretches where nothing happens except your own thoughts crushing you. Broken by sudden moments where Drukhari guards yank someone out by the arm, dragging them into darkness. The unpredictability is the point. You don't get to choose whether your fear is slow or sharp. They choose it for you. Then comes distribution, and it is here that Commorragh's horrifying efficiency becomes undeniable. Captives are marched through corridors like cattle through arteries. Every cable has its own routes, its own slave lifts, its own sorting chutes. You walk across platforms suspended over pits where monstrous shadows move. Failed experiments, old captives who outlived their usefulness, creatures grown from the leftovers of other prisoners. You see glimpses of what you might become. A flayed form twitching on a rack, an arena pit filled with bleached bones, a procession of racks leading a chain gang into a Haemonculus domain. Drukhari handlers move among you, tapping data pads, calling out terms in their elegant, venomous tongue. They don't look at you. They look through you, as if you are furniture being arranged. The only time they show interest is when someone panics, because that spike of fear is delicious in the psychic air. Your terror is the only language they expect you to speak. If you are unlucky enough to be selected for the Haemonculi, and statistically many captives are, you are led down into the flesh crypts, where the air grows moist and smells faintly metallic. Your feet slip on floors that shouldn't be organic but are. You hear distant moans, some human, some not. You see racks gliding past, their mutilated silhouettes casting long shadows that look more alien than the creatures themselves. You might beg, you might scream, you might try to fight. None of it matters. The Haemonculi will remake you whether you accept it or not. You might become a specimen, a test subject, a component in a larger creation, a spare part. They will keep you alive until they decide your pain has more value in death, or until your death becomes a problem they can simply reverse. The horrors of the Haemonculi are not just physical. They are psychological. They show you their tools. They discuss your anatomy in front of you. They explain the changes they will make to your body as if they are excited sculptors discussing a commission. In their hands, you learn that suffering can be endless only because they do not allow it to end. If the Wyches select you, your fate is no kinder. Preparation for the arenas involves days or hours of drug cycles, conditioning, starvation, hydration, force feeding, hallucinations, and psychological torment meant to maximize performance. You might be thrown into mock arenas with shifting floors, forced to run until you collapse. You might be pitted against other captives simply to see who survives, not as a battle but as a test. You are not trained to fight. You are trained to die interestingly. Wyches visit these pens, studying captives like athletes studying opponents, but there is no empathy in their gaze, only excitement. They discuss you like a tool. How fast you run, how loud you scream, how easily you bleed, whether you have stage presence. They give you drugs that make you hyper-aware or half-delirious, whatever best serves the show. They know exactly how long your terror will last. You do not. The labor thralls fare no better. They are taken to the subrealms, industrial sectors of Commorragh built from welded starship hulls, corrupted Webway scraps, and ancient ruins. Here, slaves haul massive components, clean toxic waste, or operate machinery powered by pain. Some are fitted with neural lashes, devices that shock them at random intervals to produce ongoing fear. Others are forced into dangerous work zones where accidents are encouraged. Food is scarce. Water is rationed. The Drukhari use exhaustion as fuel. They like the taste of fear mingled with fatigue. Labor thralls often last longer than arena captives or Haemonculi subjects, but this longevity is its own curse. The slow erosion of hope becomes a prolonged execution, 1 hour at a time. Some captives are sent to the soul markets, where merchants, many of them Drukhari nobles, some ancient beyond comprehension, inspect bodies with unsettling affection. They buy captives not for labor or spectacle, but for personal collections, private shows, or twisted hobbies. Some keep living humans as furniture, bending and shaping them with homunculus assistance. Others keep them as living instruments whose screams are tuned like violins. Some buy them simply to watch them fade over weeks in a dim, luxurious cell. The Drukhari see this not as cruelty but as taste. They believe a refined noble must curate their agony experiences the way a human might curate art. And then, for the unlucky few, there is the ultimate horror, the never-ending cycle. Some captives die repeatedly in arenas, only to be resurrected by Haemonculi for new performances. Others expire on operating slabs and are revived because the experiment wasn't finished. Some are kept alive for years, sustained by nutrient tubes and nerve stimulators, their bodies patched together, their sanity long gone. In Commorragh, death is not an escape. It is a reset button. The Drukhari perfected immortality through atrocity, and they see no reason why you should not share in that eternity, just on the opposite side of the blade. But the final truth, the one that crushes your spirit entirely, comes not in screams, but in silence. In a rare moment when no guard stands near, no witch cheers, no homunculus observes, you realize something terrible. The Drukhari believe they are owed your suffering. They consider you inferior, ephemeral, a short-lived species that wastes its emotions on petty things like love, hope, and faith. They view themselves as connoisseurs and you as ingredients. To them, your pain is not a crime. It is a resource the universe intended them to harvest. And once you understand this, the last fragile thread of hope breaks. Because the truth of Commorragh is simple and devastating. You were never meant to escape. You were meant to last. Chapter 7, Asdrubael Vect, the King of Cruelty and his Black Heart Empire. What if the darkest truth about Commorragh is that all its cruelty, every raid, every scream, every arena death, every homunculus experiment, flows from a single chilling idea perfected by one man? That suffering isn't a consequence of Drukhari society. It's the foundation of its stability. Asdrubael Vect, the master of the Black Heart, didn't just rise to power, he engineered Commorragh into the ruthless machine it is today. He didn't inherit his throne. He carved it from the flesh of those who underestimated him. And the worst part? He proved that pain could be weaponized not just as sustenance or entertainment, but as political capital. Vect turned cruelty into currency, suffering into strategy, and Commorragh into a city whose heartbeat is torture. To understand why being taken by the Drukhari is worse than death, you must understand Vect's worldview, because Commorragh functions the way it does because he wanted it that way. Without Vect, the Dark City would have devoured itself long ago. Instead, he taught it to devour everything else. Before Vect, Commorragh was chaotic, vicious even by Drukhari standards. Cabals rose and fell in violent cycles, which cults fought for scraps. Haemonculi pursued their own agendas, and the city teetered constantly on the edge of collapse. It was a rotting empire held together by fear and decay, its factions too busy cannibalizing one another to harvest real space efficiently. Vect saw opportunity in disorder. He watched the aristocratic houses crumble under their own arrogance. He noted how predictable their betrayals were, how easily their defenses could be subverted, how deeply their politics relied on tradition rather than insight. And then, like a blade sliding between ribs, he inserted himself. Not with noble blood, Vect had none, but with intelligence, ruthlessness, and an unrivaled understanding of what truly motivates the Drukhari. He realized the Drukhari did not need unity. They needed direction. Not law, but structure. Not mercy, but efficiency. And he built his empire accordingly. Vect's Cable, the Black Heart, began as a small syndicate, a minor group too insignificant to threaten the great houses. But Vect played a game they didn't even realize existed. He built alliances with Haemonculi covens by offering them fresh captives in bulk. He supported Wych Cults with slave shipments that guaranteed packed arenas and constant spectacle. He manipulated smaller cabals into fighting each other by feeding them lies crafted to ignite paranoia. All the while, Vect's agents mapped Commorragh's infrastructure, its secret routes, its hidden depths, its forgotten corners. He used this knowledge like a scalpel. One by one, the old aristocratic houses fell, not to open war, but to internal sabotage, mysterious disappearances, sudden collapses of political support. Their fleets vanished. Their fortresses imploded. Their soul vaults were emptied. Their names became warnings. And at the center of every disaster was a shadow with a black heart. For prisoners like you, Vect's rise matters because it created the Commorragh you now suffer in. He reorganized the city around predation. He made raiding systematic. He increased slave processing efficiency. He incentivized cabals to push deeper into real space and return with more captives than ever before. He established pacts that tied Wych Cults and Haemonculi covens into mutually dependent networks. Wyches needed slaves for spectacle, Haemonculi needed bodies for their art, cabals needed both for power, and Vect needed all of them bound to him. Vect didn't centralize power to enforce order. He centralized cruelty to enforce survival. By turning Commorragh's cruelty into a structured economy, he ensured that his empire would not only endure but expand relentlessly. The Black Heart is more than a cable. It is a template. Under Vect's rule, it became the largest, wealthiest, and most feared faction in the Dark City. Its warriors move with the confidence of predators who know the city belongs to them. Its raiding fleets strike with surgical efficiency, returning with more captives per cycle than some entire cabals gather in a century. Its commanders are chosen not for lineage but for their mixture of brutality, cunning, and political usefulness. And its symbol, a black heart, appears across Commorragh as a silent threat: obey or vanish. The Black Heart controls key Webway routes, oversees slave markets, owns half the arenas, and funds numerous Haemonculi projects. Its influence extends even into the shadows, where assassins, spies, and informants ensure no rival rises too quickly. Vect's real genius lies in understanding the psychology of his species. He knows that the Drukhari crave dominance, thrill, and survival. He knows they hate stagnation, fear weakness, and despise boredom. He feeds these instincts masterfully. He encourages cabals to compete, not through direct warfare, which wastes resources, but through raiding results, arena sponsorships, and political maneuvering. He allows betrayals, but only in ways that strengthen the city. If a cabal grows too bold, he humbles them. If they grow too weak, he replaces them. He never removes cruelty, he refines it. Under his rule, Commorragh is not merely evil. It is efficient evil, predictable evil, sustainable evil. Vect institutionalized sadism. He made it the backbone of society. From the Drukhari perspective, Vect is not a tyrant, he is a savior. They see him as the one who prevented their species from slipping into Slaanish's maw entirely. They believe his reforms, his manipulations, and his strategies have bought them time, centuries, millennia. They admire his brilliance, his brutality, his willingness to make decisions others find unthinkable. When a cabal's slave quotas fall, Vect does not punish them publicly. He lets their rivals cannibalize them. When a witch cult grows too arrogant, he cuts their funding quietly, forcing them to earn their prestige back through blood. When a homunculus coven grows restless, he commissions new work, feeding their egos and obsessions. He doesn't rule with fear, he rules by making himself indispensable. For a human captive, this means something particularly horrifying. Vect's system ensures that your suffering is not a byproduct of chaos. It is a necessity. The cabals need you to maintain political power. The witch cults need you to please the crowds. The Haemonculi need you to continue their art. And Vect needs all three to remain stable. Your pain lubricates the machinery of an empire built on structured torment. Every scream you release is part of the city's architecture. Every tear you shed reinforces Vect's hold. Every moment you endure extends the lifespan of the Drukhari around you. You are not dying for entertainment. You are dying for infrastructure. Vect's personal cruelty is subtle, but deeper than the others. He rarely involves himself in torture. He does not appear in arenas. He does not stroll through Haemonculi labs. He does not need to. His cruelty lies in the design of the city itself. The fear you feel walking through Commorragh's hanging bridges is his doing. The efficiency of your capture is his doing. The cycle that prevents you from dying easily is his doing. The way cabals fight for you like a resource is his doing. He architected a world where suffering is harvested with the same care humanity applies to crops. But even Vect has enemies, and this adds another dimension to your fate. The Drukhari who oppose him do not want reform or mercy. They want his throne so they can unleash even greater horrors. When they strike through you. Raids increase. Torture intensifies. Political instability forces cabals to prove their strength through more extravagant cruelty. And every time someone challenges Vect, the slave pens overflow as rival factions rush to display their dominance. You suffer not just for the city's balance, but for its imbalance. Vect himself, ancient and inscrutable, rarely speaks of his past. Some say he was born a slave, used, discarded, reshaped, and remade until he learned the true language of power. Others claim he rose from the gutters of Commorragh, mastering its chaos from the bottom up. A few whisper he escaped Slaanish's clutch through unconventional means. Whatever the truth, it forged someone who sees existence as a hierarchy of victims and victors, and he decided he would never again be the former. When he rules, he does it with the cold certainty of someone who knows pain intimately and wields it like a scalpel. So when you stare at the horizon of the dark city, its impossible towers, its endless sprawl, its arteries of suffering, you must understand that this nightmare is not natural. It is engineered, calculated, perfected. Vect didn't just inherit the city's cruelty. He taught it how to sing. He taught it how to feed. He made sure that the Drukhari would never falter, never weaken, never stop hungering. And you are just one more drop of blood in a sea he commands. One more scream feeding a system older than your civilization. Because in the empire of the Black Heart, suffering isn't a mistake. It is the plan. Chapter 8, 10,000 Years of Rot. The long war, plague legions, and endless corruption. What if the most terrifying truth about the Drukhari is not what they do to their captives in this moment? Not the raids or arenas or Haemonculi laboratories you've already endured, but the fact that this nightmare has been running for 10,000 years without slowing, weakening, or changing. Commorragh is not a recent atrocity. It is ancient, layered in millennia of cruelty, scarred by the echoes of a civilization that refused to die after birthing a god of excess that devoured its soul. The Drukhari have spent an eternity refining their methods, sharpening their culture into a razor that cuts everything it touches. Every scream you release becomes part of a legacy older than your species' recorded history. They are not improvising cruelty, they are perfecting it. And the deeper you sink into the bones of the dark city, the more you realize that what you experience today is only a thin surface layer of horrors built over ages by beings who've known nothing but survival through predation. The long war, the endless, unbroken period in which the Drukhari have raided, tortured, and consumed the pain of others, did not begin as a war. It began as a consequence. When the fall tore the soul from the Eldari Empire and birthed She Who Thirsts, the survivors learned that their essence was no longer theirs. Every breath they took, every moment they lived, brought them closer to annihilation. To exist was to be hunted. The craft world Eldari fled into asceticism and ritual to protect themselves. The Exodites hid on distant worlds. But the Proto-Drukhari, those who would become the Lords of Commorragh, chose a darker path. Instead of denying desire, they weaponized it. Instead of running from Slaanesh, they found a way to divert her hunger by feeding on the suffering of others. Their culture of torment was not created out of cruelty. It was created out of terror. Over time, that survival instinct curdled into a philosophy, then a society, and finally a civilization built entirely on predation. And what truly breaks your mind is understanding that the Drukhari do not simply endure this war, they thrive in it. 10,000 years of raiding have created a cycle of violence so deeply ingrained into their society that they no longer notice its monstrosity. To them, the screams rising from subrealms are no different from weather patterns. The dying lights of captured souls are as commonplace as street lamps. The terror of prisoners marching through shadowed corridors is as normal as the hum of generators. Commorragh has become a self-sustaining ecosystem where every emotion you feel is consumed, digested, and exhaled as vitality. The Drukhari who feed regularly look impossibly youthful, their skin smooth, their features sharp, their eyes bright with stolen life. Those who abstain, even for a short time, wither like rotting leaves, their bodies crumbling under the pressure of Slaanesh's pull. The long war is not ideological. It is physiological. From the Drukhari perspective, this endless cycle is not a burden, it is a privilege. They believe suffering is a resource, and they are the rightful harvesters. They see themselves as the apex predators of the galaxy, a species forged by catastrophe and sharpened by necessity. They admire the efficiency of their mechanisms, the elegance of their cruelty. They talk about the long war not with dread or regret, but with pride. Some consider themselves historians, tracking the evolution of pain across eras. Others are artists, comparing the torment techniques of the past to those of the present. A few ancient Haemonculi boast of techniques they used during the fall itself, claiming that the pain of early captives was richer because the galaxy was younger and fear more primal. To them, your suffering is just another entry in a catalog that stretches back to the birth of a god. As the centuries passed, the long war shaped Commorragh into something monstrous. Whole districts were built to optimize slave intake. Subrealms were carved open, stretched, and filled with holding pens that resemble industrial slaughterhouses more than prisons. Arena networks expanded, each cult competing to produce the greatest spectacle, each performance pushing boundaries further than the last. Haemonculi covens layered their labs across levels of the Dark City, some hidden so deep that even other Drukhari whisper rumors of what occurs there. The Cabals developed increasingly efficient raiding strategies, optimizing their fleets to harvest maximum fear per raid cycle. They created devices to extract emotional energy, psychic residue, and soul fragments with near-perfect precision. They cataloged human emotional states, mapping fear signatures the way real space civilizations map stars. Your very emotions became part of a science older than your world. The psychological impact on captives isn't accidental. It's engineered through 10,000 years of refinement. The Drukhari understand terror the way a surgeon understands anatomy. They know when to apply pressure, when to release it, when to let silence do the work. They know how long a human can hope before hope becomes despair. They know how many hours of solitude break the mind more effectively than direct pain. They know how to use sound, temperature, light, and imbalance to erode your sense of self. Their cruelty is not improvised. It is calibrated. If you spend hours sitting in a cell where nothing happens, you are experiencing a technique older than your species. If you're thrown into a pit with shifting walls, you are witnessing a millennia-old form of entertainment. If a witch dances around you, blade grazing your skin, it is not clumsiness. It is choreography perfected by thousands of performers over thousands of years. You are suffering inside a perfected system, not a chaotic one. And yet, the long war has not left the Drukhari unscarred. You see this in their eyes if you dare look. Behind their elegance and youth is something brittle, something haunted, something hollow. Their immortality is a lie purchased through theft. Their beauty is a fragile mask stretched over terror. Every Drukhari, from the lowest Kabbalite to the highest Archon, knows that the moment they stop feeding, even briefly, their soul begins to rot. Some wake in the night cycle with phantom claws tearing at their essence. Others drift into frenzies of sadism, desperate for a hit of stolen agony. Even Vect, ancient and untouchable, requires the suffering of others to remain whole. In a way, they are more enslaved than you are, trapped by a curse they cannot escape, doomed to hunger until the end of time. They hurt you because something unimaginable is always hurting them. This dependency shapes every aspect of Drukhari life, creating a society where no moment is free from danger. Drukhari must live in constant motion, constant excitement, constant predation. Boredom for them is lethal. A moment without stimulation is a moment when Slaanishes hold titans. Their parties are orgies of sensation, their feasts competitions of cruelty, their celebrations borderline riots of violence. Even their political meetings can devolve into murder if the emotional energy in the room dips too low. When a Drukhari kills, they do not see it as ending a life. They see it as preserving their own. It is horrifying, but it is also internally logical. They are not cruel because they can be. They are cruel because they must be. And this leads to the city's greatest secret. Commorragh itself is alive with the accumulated emotions of 10,000 years of suffering. Its architecture hums with psychic residue. Its foundations vibrate with the echoes of a trillion screams. Its shadows are thick with the lingering despair of long-dead victims. The Drukhari breathe this energy, bathe in it, absorb it the way plants absorb sunlight. They have built a world that sustains them through agony, and every captive, every human, every Xenos, every soul dragged screaming from real space, adds another layer to that psychic ecosystem. You are a nutrient, a spark, a fleeting moment in a city that has been feeding longer than your species has existed. And when you finally understand the scale of it, the scope of the long war, the depth of Drukhari dependence, the stability of the suffering-based economy, you realize something even more terrifying. There is no end to this. Commorragh will not fall from external threat. It cannot be starved. As long as even one world exists in real space, the Drukhari will continue to raid it. As long as Slaanesh hungers, the Drukhari will harvest fear. As long as Cabals compete, Haemonculi experiment, Wyches perform, and Archons plot, the Dark City will churn forever. Your death, your suffering, your shattered mind are nothing compared to the endless appetite of a civilization forged in the shadow of a god. Because when the Drukhari look at the galaxy, they do not see neighbors, allies, or obstacles. They see food, and the long war ensures they never stop eating. Chapter 9, Worse Than Death. Why the Drukhari cannot stop and why no one escapes. What if the final, most devastating truth about being taken by the Drukhari is not the torture, not the Haemonculi labs, not the arenas, not the cabals, not the 10,000 years of refined cruelty, but the realization that nothing you experience is personal, nothing you endure is intentional cruelty toward you as an individual, and nothing that happens to you is even unusual. The truth that breaks you is this: your suffering is routine. It is expected. It is woven into the very purpose of Commorragh. You are not unlucky. You are inevitable. And as you witness the Dark City from the depths of its nightmare architecture, from the echoing pits and thundering arenas, from the shadowed corridors where racks glide like nightmares given form, from the observation balconies where aristocrats drink in the terror of captives as though it were fine wine, you realize the universe has made a simple, horrifying mistake. It allowed a species to survive by consuming pain, and it did nothing to stop them when they decided to perfect the process. To the Drukhari, you are not a tragedy, you are fuel. And the final verdict of your existence inside this place is the coldest truth of all. No matter how loudly you scream, no one hears you. No one comes. No one rescues. You do not matter. You never did. Everything you've seen in Commorragh, every cell, every arena, every lab, every slave line, every cable fortress, is part of a cyclical machine designed to ensure the Drukhari never have to face death. They don't torture for sport. They torture for maintenance. The soul thirst of Slaanesh hangs over them like a cosmic predator, reaching for their essence with claws made of hunger and inevitability. The only way to survive is to drown out that pull with the psychic feedback of agony stolen from others. This revelation isn't whispered or hidden among the Drukhari. It is accepted, normalized, even celebrated. They believe they have outsmarted a god, escaped annihilation through innovation, turned damnation into strategy. They see themselves as the ultimate survivors of the fall, the only Eldari who refuse to kneel or repent. And from that warped perspective, everything they do to you is justified, not morally but cosmically. You are the buffer between them and oblivion. The Drukhari are not merely cruel, they are desperate, and desperation mixed with millennia of cultural evolution creates the kind of horror that defies comprehension. This desperation drives their raids. The Drukhari know their time runs differently in the Webway. What feels like weeks to them might be months or years in real space. Entire generations vanish between their strikes. A planet that suffers a raid may rebuild, repopulate, and grow complacent, only for a new raid to come from the same cable with the same level of efficiency and cruelty, because in Commorragh time is irrelevant. What matters is demand. Some cycles require more slaves for arena festivals, others for Haemonculi projects, others for political bribes or soul banking investments. Your species never stands a chance because you are predictable, soft, emotionally vibrant, and physiologically easy to work with. Humans scream well. Humans break well. Humans produce rich fear. And for 10,000 years, the Drukhari have come to understand this with the clinical certainty of farmers who know exactly when their crops will ripen. The psychological devastation becomes total when you realize that even if the Imperium or some alien empire somehow invaded Commorragh directly, even if they reached the Dark City's core, even if they toppled towers and shattered fortresses and slaughtered cabals by the thousands, your fate still wouldn't change. Because the Drukhari are not centralized around structure, they are centralized around need. They would flee through Webway routes you didn't know existed. They would scatter, regroup, rebuild, and they would come back. Their hunger is not a political system that can be dismantled. It is a biological curse that cannot be erased. You cannot starve a species whose survival depends on the agony of others. You cannot reason with them. You cannot scare them. You cannot threaten them. They've lived longer than your civilizations, survived the birth of a god, thrived under the weight of endless war. You cannot stop what they have become. This leads to the central, devastating question of this chapter. Why is being taken by the Drukhari worse than death? And the answer lies not in how you die, but in how you don't. Death is clean. Death is final. Death is merciful. But in Commorragh, death is flexible. It bends. It stalls. It resets. It becomes a tool, a threat, a toy, a pause in a performance that resumes the moment a homunculus decides you aren't finished yet. They bring captives back from the brink not because they cherish life, but because your agony has not yet reached its potential. They study your tolerance thresholds the way scientists study climate patterns. They reshape your nerve clusters to create new symphonies of pain. They graft organs in unnatural arrangements to generate novel sensations. They break your mind not all at once, but in spirals, destroying hope slowly, painfully, methodically. Death would end the process too early. Even the Wyches understand this. They prefer to kill captives only at the peak of performance, ensuring the maximum psychic release for the crowd. If you die too soon, you are seen as a waste. If you die too slowly, you become boring. The perfect death is a crescendo, a violent burst of emotional feedback that radiates through the dark city like an electric pulse. And if you happen to be entertaining, they will resurrect you, patch your body, adjust your drug doses, and throw you back into the pit. Some captives survive dozens of matches, their minds shattered, their bodies altered beyond recognition. They are prized not as individuals, but as assets. The Haemonculi take this even further. For them, your death is merely a technical inconvenience, something to be undone with a flick of their wrist. They can store fragments of your soul in vats, stitch your consciousness into new flesh, clone your memories into new bodies. They can recreate you in multiple pieces, each capable of screaming separately. They can turn you into a puppet, a display, a tool. And they do it all with the calm, clinical interest of artisans perfecting their craft. To them, death is a door they walk through daily, dragging their victims behind them. But the most horrific revelation, the one that crushes your final thread of resistance, is the knowledge that even if you somehow escaped, even if you found your way into the Webway, even if you reached real space again, you would never be the same. The Drukhari leave marks that no surgery, no therapy, no psychic cleansing can erase. Haemonculi implants remain dormant until triggered, which toxins linger in your bloodstream for years. Neural scars echo phantom pain that wakes you from sleep screaming. Some escapees develop overwhelming paranoia, unable to sleep without lights, unable to trust silence, unable to stand crowds because they feel phantom Drukhari eyes watching them. Others lose the capacity to feel joy or safety or hope. Some become violently unstable, their minds shattered by experiences that cannot be articulated. The Drukhari do not simply torture bodies, they sculpt souls. And from the Drukhari perspective, this is not cruelty. This is necessity. They believe themselves superior because they have adapted to a universe that tried to destroy them. They believe their hunger is a sign of evolution, not damnation. They believe pain is a resource, not a tragedy. They see themselves as survivors who refuse to bow before fate. And in a way, they are right. They have outlived empires. They have conquered time. They have turned their darkest impulses into a society that thrives where others would crumble. This is why, in the end, your disappearance into the Webway is not a story. It is not a loss. It is not a tragedy. It is a transaction. Commorragh gains what it needs. The Drukhari feed. The city breathes. The machine continues. And the universe remains indifferent. Because when the Drukhari take you, they do not just end your life. They erase the meaning of death itself.